All right, there you go. Recording in process. So welcome to our workshop. Gage and I have had the privilege of, I think this is our second workshop together.
Yeah.
We've been working on this workshop series, which is really fun, and it's a great way for us to really bring our minds together as we work on these. But today our topic is strength in awareness, connecting feelings and pain. So really diving into the relationship between our emotions, emotional awareness, and chronic pain. Let's move forward here. And just to let you know who I am, I've met some of you, but I'm Dr. Lauren Flynn. I am a licensed therapist here at Flowly.
Yeah, and I'm Gage, backgrounds in clinical social work, and I'm also one of the providers here at Flowly. Let's get into things here. And before we start getting into like the meat and potatoes of the presentation, I want to walk you all through a quick exercise. And let's just slow down and pause for a moment. Let's take like an internal check-in. Let's take some intentional breaths in and out through the nose. Nothing with any deep force, just allowing your breath to go in and out. And with those couple of breaths, let's draw our attention to some thought of what are you feeling in this moment? Are there any particular emotions present that you can name or identify? What do you notice with your body? Are there any sensations you can feel within your hands or in your chest? Have you eaten recently? Do you feel hungry or full? Did you get enough sleep last night? Has it been a busy day now that, at least here on the East Coast, we're into the afternoon? Is there something coming up in the near future that's been on your mind? Maybe there are some feelings around this workshop today. Take a couple more breaths and allow yourself to kind of come back and let go of some of those thoughts and feelings that you may have noticed. I wanted to start today with that very brief kind of exercise here, because when we're discussing emotional awareness and expression, this is the first skill in being able to practice of slowing down and recognizing these feelings and complex emotions when they begin to arise, so we can go about them in a very intentional way. Let's go to the next slide, Lauren. I wanted to start with this slide here after our exercise to help us understand and express our emotions, to outline some terminology that you'll hear over the course of the workshop today. And let's start with feelings. And defining kind of what feelings are is feelings are internal, subjective experiences that arise in responses to thoughts, memories, sensations within the body, or events going on around us. Some things to consider are physical sensations, tightness in the chest, warmth, heaviness. Then there's the mental interpretations too of maybe feeling overwhelmed, feeling hopeful. And then some things that maybe are a bit more sustainable and last a bit longer are these shifts in energy and mood. When I'm talking about feelings, I tend to put them in this area of feelings give us information to help us understand if there's something we need to do, what's important to us, if there are boundaries that have been crossed, in a particular situation, and if there's a direction we need to go in. Going over to emotions are a bit more complex, still subjective in their experiences, involving feelings, physiological reactions, behavioral responses, and can be triggered by internal or external stimuli. So internal stimuli, things that are occurring within the body, and then external stimuli, the things that are around you, things that you're experiencing within your environment. Individuals don't necessarily experience emotions consciously. Now, through feelings and terminology, we're able to identify and pinpoint certain emotions that our body is experiencing, but the emotion itself, the process of the emotions occurring, is happening within the brain's limbic system. And now over to mood. Moods encompass more of like a sustained emotional state. Thinking this is a bit more drawn out type of state. Moods can be less intense, influencing one's overall like disposition, coloring their perceptions, behaviors over an extended period of time. We can move on to the next slide. And what's the purpose of all these? Feelings and emotions are biological in purpose, and they also have a physiological purpose. They're not random or even a problem. They're information and it's guidance for our system. Emotions signal importance. They can alert you to something that matters to you, thinking of danger, loss, opportunity, connection. They can prepare your body for action. You know, what do I got to do next? Where do I need to go? You know, with motivating behavior, emotions can drive you towards or away from a certain situation. Help with facilitating communication, your voice, your tone, your face, posture, nonverbal cues, and things like that. And also helping with decision making, links to our values, beliefs, informing our decisions, in addition to logic. Feelings are how we experience and interpret emotions internally. More of this mapping of your internal state, what's going on in your mind and your body, helping you understand your needs. They can support with reflection and choices. Because feelings are conscious, they help you pause and think, choose a response instead of reacting automatically. They can help with creating meaning. Feelings help you attach significance to your experiences, to your relationships, to your memories. We can move to the next one, Lauren. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I want to talk a bit about how this shows up in the brain. And when we're talking about emotions and feelings, particularly want to highlight the limbic system. And the limbic system includes structures like the amygdala, hippocampus, arterials, cingulate cortex, can never say that word, insula, and parts of our prefrontal cortex. And the primary jobs that happen within our limbic system are detecting threats, producing emotions, encoding memories into our brain, regulating motivations, and managing stress responses. Because pain has an emotional, a sensory, and a memory component, the limbic system is heavily involved in our pain experiences.
Gage, just before we move forward, I want to point out a question that we had in the chat here. It says, I always have a hard time knowing the difference between emotions and feelings, since sad is an emotion and a feeling. Is anxiousness an emotion or just a feeling?
When I think of anxiousness, I also think it falls within that group of both, mm-hmm. where naturally there's this unconscious response that occurs within the body, which is the emotional piece of anxiousness, where your heart may begin to race, palms begin to get sweaty, and that happens completely without your knowledge or doing. And then the feeling piece is the things that we may be able to identify a bit more with of certain events that begin to make us feel anxious or induce that anxious state. So yeah, for me, it is a bit both as well. Lauren, I don't know if you have anything to add to that as well. I know differentiating between the two can be a difficult thing. even putting the slides together, it's, how can you put this in a digestible way without creating more confusion, or thinking that one is like matters more than the other.
Right. And I think you bring up a great point, is we are talking about some constructs that can feel abstract and feel really big. And the way that we are trying to categorize them is really to help us make sense of them. So when we talk about anxiousness, like, yes, we can feel that both very palpably as an emotion and within our bodies, and then we can think into it as well. But anxiousness also can sometimes be an umbrella. And that's an important thing for us to think about when we think of emotions, is can emotions be a catch-all? Sadness, anger, they're oftentimes so deeply complex when we actually take a look at them. And I think the same thing for anxiety. Oftentimes we use the umbrella term anxiety, but beneath it, there's insecurity, there's worry, there's fear, there's these different kind of sub experiences that make it up. So I don't know that that answers the question, but I think it kind of points to the complexity of this part of the human experience.
Absolutely.
Would you like me to move on to the next slide for you?
Yeah, let's jump over.
Perfect.
This slide's more of a continuation of the limbic system and more of how it relates back to pain. So some things to consider are, the limbic system controlling the volume within our body, like the dial on the radio, and specifically around things of like danger, stress, overwhelm, can increase pain. So the dial's getting turned up on the volume within our bodies. Things like safety, control, familiarity tend to decrease pain, allowing our body to feel more calm. The volume, dial's turned down. This is why pain tends to increase in moments of stress, fatigue, conflict, traumatic experiences, and decreases in moments where we're feeling very supported. We're calm, we're at peace, moments of confidence where we feel really confident and competent in what we're doing and engaging in meaningful activities. Drawing some attention to the amygdala of assigning meaning. This is important for identifying threat, being able to determine sensations if they are dangerous or not for ourselves, and also identifying safety, whether it's in our surroundings or things that we're experiencing within our body. And then the hippocampus stores context of past pain through memory. So your brain may begin to react to specific places, movements, sensations, even after an old injury. And internally, the tissue or the area of the body has healed, but through the hippocampus, there's been certain familiarity and context that had been learned within that area of the brain, then beginning to reignite or intensify those experiences, even if there's physically something that's no longer there.
Mm. We have a question for you in the chat, and I think it really goes back to that volume control piece that you're speaking to, that says, is that why some people resort to over controlling to help decrease pain?
Yeah, and that can kind of work on both ends, right? In some situations, we can seek some control in hopes of decreasing pain. And in addition to that, sometimes focusing so much on control can make us become a bit hypervigilant and increase stress. There is a fine balance when talking about control of, yes, there are moments where it decreases pain, but if that's something we're solely relying on, especially when we're trying to take control over situations that really are not within our control, can actually increase stress and turn that volume button up. And because we begin to realize that, wow, no matter how hard I'm trying, no matter what I'm doing here, I'm not getting the result that I want.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide.
Now let's talk a bit about emotional expression and pain. Chronic pain is often driven by the brain's interpretation of sensations as danger. Being on high alert mode, this fight, flight, freeze reactions that amplify pain signals throughout the body and can lead to bottling up, avoiding, embracing, and bracing for certain sensations and feelings within the body. Unexpressed emotions, especially things like fear, anger, sadness, guilt, stress, sends signals from the limbic system of something is wrong here, and it puts it on high alert. Chronic tension sensitizes nerves throughout the body that can increase pain. So when I'm talking about this, I'm thinking of, moments where, you're tightening your muscles up or you brace yourself. Thinking of other feelings here of when you maybe hold your breath. I guess for this one, you think of like maybe a scary movie and you can feel the anticipation. You begin to hold your breath just a little bit because something is coming. You're just not quite sure yet. And also can dictate posture. I'm coming off a bit more guarded and reserved. These are all things that can happen physiologically as a result to certain emotions with them not being expressed. My slides are moving a little bit slower than yours, Lauren. There we go. This can be helpful for some, and I also want to kind of preface on this slide that this isn't the end-all be-all of groups. I wanted to put these groups on here because I think they can help with terminology and understanding emotions and feelings. One of the early parts of beginning to identify and recognize these is giving us some terminology in terms of like, what am I talking about? Do we have even a vocabulary to describe what we're feeling? So that's why I put this slide in here. It's not perfect in terms of like, oh, everything belongs in certain groups, but this is also kind of how our brain tends to work, because it likes to put things into groups to be able to keep track of things. And some groups I want to point out is this anger group, which can include anger, frustration, annoyance, resentment, sadness, loneliness, grief, hopelessness, more in the sadness group. In the fear group, you have fear, anxiety, panic, worry, connection, love, connection, gratitude, compassion, and then joy, happiness, pride, relief, excitement.
I want to throw in here, we have a great question in the chat. It's how would an emotion like bittersweet fit in? I feel like it's both bad and good. And I'll speak to this real quick and then I'll have you add on anything else. But I will say, really, the goal here is to promote what we'd call emotional literacy. It's our ability to be able to have language and understanding of these different things that we're feeling. So in order for us to really address the feeling, we have to be able to accurately identify it. So if you think into the sadness group, there's nuances between these different emotions. And so if you're able to recognize that the type of sadness that you're feeling is actually loneliness, that gives you an opportunity to address that loneliness that might be different from grief. And so bittersweet, I feel like it's one of those ones that actually might be multiple emotions. Bittersweet might be that you're pulling from both the sadness group and the joy group. You might be experiencing grief over a change, but also joy over something new. So I kind of see bittersweet as one that really recognizes the both and, that you can hold competing emotions at one time.
Yeah, beautifully said, Lauren. The one thing that everyone may notice too is something that was left out of the grouping is emotions that are good and bad, because that is not how they work. Although there may be some emotions that feel less ideal for us and maybe feel unpleasant when we're experiencing them, all these emotions are necessary to, depending on situations, and they serve a purpose for ourselves. So it's not that there's an emotion that is good or bad or falls within those categories. All of them have a necessary purpose. even if there are some that are more difficult to experience.
Mm.
As we recognize these different emotions, I want us to slow down again. And I want everyone to pick something that feels familiar to them. Look at these lists here and these groupings. Is there a specific emotion that stands out to you? One that seems familiar? And I want you to think about, what does that feel like in your body when this emotion is occurring? How does it influence your actions? If anyone feels comfortable, they're welcome to share them in the chat. I'll start by sharing one for myself and I'm going to go with grief. Lauren brought it up, and I don't think that was the one I was going to actually stick with when I first planned this, but I want to use grief because it is very complex and it's bittersweet in both, and that the emotion of grief is incredibly complex. That for me, when I feel grief, there tends to be this heaviness within the body, and there can include some what if thinking of, well, what if I did something different, or that I miss out on an opportunity here. And at the same time, too, there's also a connection piece for me that I can resonate with when I think of grief. I can think back on positive memories or things that I enjoy, prior to this, to more the negative feelings that are associated with grief. Um, and I think grief, again, is a complex way of how it influences my behavior. I think for me, sometimes I can retreat and I really want to reflect in the moments of feeling grief. Like, that is my go-to. I really like some alone time, sit and kind of process all my thoughts on my own. Not a very vocal processor in terms of, when I'm experiencing grief. I know that can be different for a lot of people. Let me take a peek at the chat.
Yeah, and I'll also chime in here because one thing that came to my mind immediately is sometimes our language, we have really strong language that kind of ties into the physical sensation of things. I think when I feel disappointed, there's this phrase called feeling gutted. That means like you just feel it in your stomach, and there's this like awareness of what that to be gutted feels like. And so I think for me that draw a relationship so strongly between that emotion and that physical feeling. And I think that then what action that it pulls out of me, I think there can be many paths. I think the instinctual response to feeling that visceral sensation is maybe to isolate, maybe to pull inward and try to self-soothe. And ideally, like, self-soothe in a way that can help bring me through disappointment, to make sense of it and accept it. But I'll bring attention to what's in the chat here. I see that someone mentioned stress. I feel that that's more a physical sensation than an emotion. I don't know if I feel stress. I don't know if I feel stress, but I can feel it in my body. But I'm trying to do a gratitude exercise every morning, though, to feel gratitude. That's wonderful. And we'll address gratitude actually as a form of expression later on in this presentation. All right. Would you like me to proceed, Gage?
Yeah, let's go on to the next one.
Okay.
Before we get into more specific strategies, I also want to take a moment and recognize barriers, challenges, and considerations when it comes to emotional expression. The ability to experience emotions is natural and biological. We already talked about those things. But how we can express those emotions can vary from person to person. And there's a lot of influences for us to keep in mind. And these influences can sometimes lead to unhealthy forms of expression or suppression. Thinking of culture and beliefs, what we believe to be right and wrong, and what can be, what is acceptable can heavily influence how we express certain emotions. Social norms, thinking about personal identities, sex, gender, race, age, religion, etc., are subject to societal expectations, stereotypes, things that we often internalize over the course of our lives that can lead us to believing how we should act and think. Should is one of my least favorite words. That's why I threw my quotes around it. Childhood trauma, adverse experiences can shape us biologically throughout development. Being exposed or experiencing certain traumas can lead to suppressed emotions, challenges with regulation, and actual changes within our nervous system. They also heavily influence how our brain takes in and categorizes information. So back to that limbic system slide that we were talking about. Thinking of our upbringing, our earliest forms of learning come through observation at a young age. So how emotions and feelings are addressed, communicated, and expressed by those around us shapes what we learn to think about them. We can also be conditioned to, again, how we should respond to certain emotions. I think for me as a male, growing up, it was far more acceptable and I didn't receive so much criticism or kind of judgment in moments that I was angry or frustrated, that the outward expression of anger was kind of expected by, those around you. And on the flip side of that, difficulties with the sadness piece, moments that are tearful or hard, for me, it's a lot easier, even there's a tendency to want to suppress those things, keep them internalized, not allowing others around me to see tears fall or to remain composed and stoic in certain situations. Not everyone needs to share if you don't feel comfortable to, but I would like everyone to kind of consider and think about this for themselves. Are there any emotions that you feel maybe have been influenced by any one or multiple of these considerations?
Okay, we have a message
in the chat here. I think I grew up with nonverbal confirmation of affection or emotions, but I was shown love. Like, for example, my parents wouldn't say that they love me, but they would bring me fruit. So I think I have a hard time expressing it verbally. So thank you. Love is absolutely one of these things that has a lot of factors in terms of expression. There's even the test out there, right, to determine your love language. And a lot of these are influenced by these considerations, right, of, is someone more comfortable with providing gifts or verbal expression, acts of service and things like that. So love is a wonderful example, for this slide.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, Engage. Thank you for giving your example as well. I think that it's such a common experience, and being able to really consider how these factors shape the way that we make sense of our emotions is really helpful. It's helpful to see almost like these invisible strings that have led us to make sense of emotions in the way that we do. And oftentimes our emotions and what we allow ourselves to experience are, a direct representation of those systems and spaces that we've been a part of. And so what we're moving into now is really, what can expression be? And so how can you move through emotions in a way that allows you to process them and release them, particularly when we're talking about emotions that are heavy, ones that really strain our nervous system. So now I want to share with you steps that you can take to build a model or a pathway for navigating and expressing emotion. So the first step here is to slow down and hold space. So emotions often happen very fast. We can, a common example I think is when people are driving, it almost feels like the instance of road rage sometimes just ignites within people and occurs really suddenly. Emotions can kind of take us by surprise sometimes. But emotions are something we all experience. They're part of the human experience. We're not trying to have you not experience certain emotions. It's never the goal to get rid of anger or get rid of sadness. It's learning skills to how do I move through this emotion rather than trying to outrun it or letting it control me. So holding space means bringing attention to how you feel and knowing that it's worth your time and attention to do that. Oftentimes we can get in cycles where we're so busy that we ignore how we're feeling. It feels like we don't have the time or the luxury to grieve, to feel the thing that it seems like needs to be felt. And so this first step here is pushing yourself to do that, pushing yourself to slow down and say, okay, this emotion deserves my attention. The next step is notice what you're feeling. And this can often be difficult when we might not have the awareness necessarily, but you can really clue into what's happening in your body and what your thoughts are saying to help give you a clue of what you might be feeling. Sometimes you might just, maybe feel sweaty and heart racing and not really be able to determine what that means. And it's slowly with time being clued into your body, include into your thoughts. Do my thoughts sound angry and my body's feeling escalated? Okay, I'm making sense of what this feeling means for me. So 2, notice how you're feeling. 3, name what you are feeling. And this, will come with time. This is a skill set, being able to recognize, okay, my thoughts and my body, I know that I'm feeling this sensation or this feeling. So when you name the emotion, one important thing with this is to really use I statements, but use the phrase, I'm feeling blank. We oftentimes, blend who we are with how we feel. So I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm anxious, rather than I'm feeling blank. When we say I am blank, we often increase the feeling and feel powerless in relationship to it. It almost feels all consuming when you're saying I am angry, versus recognizing everyone feels anger. It's a human thing. Being able to say I'm feeling angry, it helps you recognize that feelings are a temporary state. They'll come and they'll go. And so for you to be able to say I'm feeling blank helps you to be able to remember that piece. We are not what we feel. We're just humans that feel things. The 4th step is to accept the feeling. We just talked about these cultural and internal and external factors that really shape the way that we make sense of emotion, that often lead us to avoid or try to outrun emotions. So being able to recognize that we're going to have resistance. If I grew up in a household that didn't accept sadness, then it's going to be hard for me to allow myself to feel that because I haven't learned that it's safe. So the first step is the first step in accepting this feeling is recognizing that you might have some resistance there, and that's okay. So accepting that feeling. And as you continue to do that, as you challenge maybe that internal resistance around it, you gain more confidence and comfort with your emotions, which allows you to better regulate it. You can't regulate an emotion that you've never allowed yourself to experience. If you've never allowed yourself to experience grief, if you've always tried to outrun it, you didn't give yourself the chance to learn the skills of how to move through it. So the more that you allow that feeling to come in, even if it's undesirable, the better equipped you are at navigating that emotion. Whereas alternatively, when you engage in avoidance or suppression, your body knows that it causes stress on your nervous system and buildup of tension and increased sensitivity to both pain and distress. So that was step 4. Step 5 is ask yourself why you're feeling this way. Emotions, although they may at times feel unpredictable, oftentimes it's your body and your brain's way of trying to give you information. They clue you into things that are important to you. So, are they informing you that something doesn't feel right, that your boundaries have been crossed, or that maybe something needs to change, you're dissatisfied, and so they're valuable. Oftentimes we mix up our emotions with how we respond. So, for instance, some people may seem to act out of anger. That's just the way that they seem to act, but really what's underneath it is something very different. So being inquisitive and being curious about your emotional experience helps you to recognize, what, I may always show up as angry when I'm feeling something, but actually beneath that anger is actually a lot of loneliness, or it's a lot of sadness that I haven't allowed myself to feel. Step 6, validate your emotions, even if it might feel like an emotion you don't want to experience, even if it's something like jealousy, and you're saying, I don't want to feel jealous. Be able to validate yourself of that's a human experience. This will come up, and pretending it's not there won't help you move through it. So allowing yourself to say, okay, even if this is a feeling I don't want to have, I recognize it and it's there. And then last, take informed action that aligns with your values. You're getting in all of this information about your thoughts, your feelings, maybe patterns that you're engaging in around your emotions. And you can use all this to say, you know what, if my emotions are really cluing me in to something doesn't feel right at work, something doesn't feel right in my relationship, something feels uncomfortable within a certain setting, you're able to use all of that information to say, you know what, this is an opportunity to use this information and think of my values. Let's say something I'm doing at work or something that's happening is conflicting with my values. And so this gives me an opportunity to engage in values-based decision making.
Yeah, before we move on, yeah, I love the engagement in the chat. A couple of things, Lauren.
Mhm.
Someone mentions taking a meditation course, and it talks through up to step 4, and then the next step is more of letting the feeling go,
Mhm.
but liking this additional steps of self-inquiry. And when I think of meditation, I think more of, purpose, right? In the moment of meditation, trying to bring yourself to a grounded state, which sometimes just, visualizing and breathing and letting something go that maybe has been being held onto can be incredibly helpful.
Mm.
This model is more focused around healthy forms of expression. So not necessarily immediately letting go what you're feeling. And that's why that inquiry piece and, the following steps are important, as forms of expression.
Mhm. And I will say, I know this seems like a lengthy process, all 7 steps, but the more you practice this, the more second nature it will become, and the more your brain begins to follow these steps intuitively. And as you get into the practice of tuning into your emotions, naming them, accepting them, it can almost feel as though one step. As you get better at this, you will no longer have that immediate resistance that you have to work against in order to address the acceptance step. The more you work at this, acceptance will be built into how you respond to yourself, and you'll learn to self-validate immediately, rather than it feeling maybe like a step or as forceful.
And Lauren, I'll throw you with a question from the chat. Is validating feelings the same as accepting it, or is it
Mm.
more like acknowledgement? How would you describe the difference
That's
of
I
validating and accepting?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. You know, I think both pieces can be hard. Validating, I really think of as a sense of encouragement. Validating can come before acceptance comes. I think acceptance is more of that final step of I've made peace with this. Sometimes validating is a step that we need to engage in, sometimes repeatedly. before we can accept. Sometimes, like, let's say I'm faced with a feeling I don't want to feel. Like, let's say I'm feeling insecure about something. And it might take a lot of internal validation for me to say, you know what, this is okay. Like, not everyone feels like a genius all the time. Like, not everyone, I'm just a human. I just make mistakes. Everyone does that. Continuously engaging in that validation will then allow me to accept this. It will allow me to accept, okay, you know what, that moment of insecurity, that feeling, I will let it go. I hope that's helpful. Okay, now moving into expression, different forms of expression. There are many forms of emotional expression. The value in having a multitude to choose from in your toolbox is that it really increases your mental and emotional flexibility and your self-regulation skills. When people can express their emotions in different ways that feel authentic to them and accessible in the moment, it really helps them to feel as though they have these tools that help them prevent emotions from feeling as though they're building up or feeling as though they're trying their best to keep them in a box. Because when we do that, it can feel so overwhelming, and it can lead us to even, when feelings are continuing to bubble up, act out in a way that's, incongruent with who we are, incongruent with our values. So having these ways to express our emotions and work through them helps us be able to move through the challenging emotions that are a part of being a human. Part of being a human is navigating, sadness, grief, anger, frustration, along with the joys that exist. But the better we are at navigating these things, the less our brains and bodies will push back at us when we experience them. So some people find that they process emotions best either through words or through movement or kind of different ways, through creativity, humor, reflection, or even silence. But regardless of what your preferred or automatic way of expression is, it's really great to be able to have a toolbox that has many, because no single form of expression will fit you for every single situation, every single emotion that you'll have. So it's important to be in tune to what you need in that moment, what your body's telling you, and from there be able to reach into your toolbox of different ways that you can express your emotions. So to kind of engage with you guys in the chat a little bit, what I'd like for you to do is to maybe look at these categories on the screen, reflect on this page, and take a moment to share in the chat maybe an example that comes to your mind that may fall under one of these categories. Maybe one that you've used and that you have found helpful.
So do you want us to write this or just speak?
However you feel like engaging. You can share it verbally if that works for you.
Yeah, because I'm not sure. I'm on my phone, and I'm not sure how to do the writing part on my phone.
No problem.
Yeah, I would just say when I'm having problems or fears or frustrations, that I like to communicate that to people. Not always be a downer to my friends or whatever, but just express what's going on. And talking to another person, my husband, my friends, my relatives, whoever. I feel like that's the one I'm probably the best at, or that feels the most comfortable. Although I love some of the other ones, my pain is so bad that I can't do a lot of things that I'd like to. A lot of the physical activities, a lot of the creative things I used to be able to do, like painting, which I loved. I'm just not able to do right now because of the pain levels. So that's something that I have a hard time with.
Absolutely. And so it really sounds like your support system is a way that they can really show up for you by being a place for expression, both for support and for you to be able to work through the frustration and the multitude of experience that come with you having this type of pain.
Right.
I also see a comment in the chat, and okay, let me scroll up. There we are. I've taken several therapeutic art workshops with Flowly, and that's been super helpful because I think I think I intellectually know what feelings are, but it's hard to connect with what I'm feeling with the words. But I thought it was interesting how my brain was naturally gravitating to certain shapes, patterns, and colors that matched how I was feeling. Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's really great to have tools in our toolbox that work almost on different frequencies. Sometimes our emotions either move so quickly or at kind of this space where it's hard to put them to words. And so having something that doesn't require words, such as drawing, it doesn't have to be a picture. It can be doodles and shapes and colors, can help you process in a way that doesn't require you to intellectualize and doesn't require you to make sense of or use words. Thank you guys for sharing. I'll just touch on a few of these. Of course, we mentioned creativity, and that comes in a lot of different forms. Flexible thinking is one that is, more intellectual, but using flexible thinking means avoiding thinking in absolutes or rigid thinking. So recognizing that there could be multiple truths. So for instance, I can be in a lot of pain, but I value my relationship so deeply that I will reach out to those meaningful relationships. I can both be in pain, but I won't let my pain isolate me. So things are seldom, absolutes. Things are seldom always the case. But rigid thinking really tries to tell us otherwise. And so this flexible thinking, which in like psychological terms is cognitive flexibility, is us being able to take data from situations and question what our old internal truths are. So if my internal truth told me, when I'm feeling sad, I must be alone, but I'm able to say, you know what, but it feels really good to share this burden with people that I trust. And so being able to be flexible with how we navigate emotions and experiences. And I will touch on a few more of these. I'll dive into gratitude a bit. And we discussed the value of communication. Reflection allows us to really use reflection as a tool for both validation and encouragement. I know that Gage mentioned with grief, he oftentimes uses reflection as a way to think back into those memories that are a mixture of both the sadness and the joy that come with grief. And natural responses, allowing for natural responses, that can be whatever comes up for you, whether it's crying or laughter. These things can be very cathartic experiences. So sound and music, throughout the course of time, humans have been drawn to sound and music. There is supported evidence that recognizes that the healing relationship between sound, vibration, and the human body. We already use music to communicate and build emotional connections. So, I'd like you to think about, what do you associate music with? You can either share it in the chat or just think about it to yourself. But there's so many ways that we have culturally integrated music: weddings, funerals, celebrations, birthdays, worship, relaxation. And sound and music help us to access emotions that are hard to reach, the same as other forms of creativity. So a way to express and communicate when words are hard to find. And music can help with releasing and regulating the nervous system. Humming, especially, as it stimulates the vagus nerve, as well as singing and dance. Love to see that music is helpful, especially jazz in the morning. That's great to see. I'm moving on now to activity and movement. So these help to discharge excess energy, shift the system back toward regulation. This type of regulation is referred to as bottom-up regulation because it's our bodies sending this regulation or this calming to our brains. So movement releases serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins in the body that help with processing and releasing emotions and restoring balance and resilience. Movement, I know, and I think this is really important to address, is that movement can be scary when you're navigating chronic pain. And there's a lot of mental associations that your brain has connected with movement that brings out fear. And at the same time, moving with intention helps people to reconnect with their bodies, express feelings in a nonverbal way, and build trust rather than fear with their physical sensations. That physical sensations could potentially mean something else for them other than pain that they're associating it with. And communication. So I'm just being mindful of time, so that's why I'm moving rather swiftly with some of these. But being able to effectively communicate our emotions is a critical skill to develop in order to reduce emotional suppression, miscommunication, and outbursts. So, I mean, it it happens to all of us. We say something as a reaction, and then we find ourselves later feeling guilty, maybe shameful or embarrassed. And having these skills and this structure of how to engage in communication can be really helpful. And I think this is particularly helpful when you're communicating through conflict, or when you're attempting to express emotions, maybe to a person or to people that are maybe linked to the situation that triggered heavy emotions. So these steps right here with communication is, first, make an effort to understand your emotions. Sometimes it is, it's helpful to enter a discussion when you've really thought through, if it's sadness or anger, are there pieces underneath that I can make sense of? Slow down and ground yourself in the present moment. Be mindful of body language and nonverbal cues. I think we've all probably either seen or been in situations where someone's saying something, but the way that they're saying it or their body language is saying something entirely different. So being really mindful to be congruent. Try to really calm your body so the way that you can show up is both mentally peaceful and physically peaceful. Use I am feeling statements, the same thing that I said before of, I'm feeling anger, not I am angry. Speak to the situation and the behaviors. Set clear boundaries. Seek understanding, not just to be heard. I think that's something that is a tool a lot of people, really work through when they're trying to improve their communication. It helps us to engage with the people around us in a way that is more connective when we're trying to understand. And step back and return later if that's what you need to be able to regulate your emotions and regulate your nervous system. And return to validate and appreciate when it happens or when it works. Okay, so the last one here is my favorite. So I really wanted to make sure that I had time to discuss gratitude. And I also want to be intentional in stating that I don't mean toxic positivity that can really cause emotional suppression or avoidance by attempting to paint over negative experiences or heavy emotions. When we talk about gratitude, we are not coming from the lens of rose-colored glasses or trying to sugarcoat anything. I'm really speaking to gratitude that acknowledges that good things and bad things can coexist simultaneously, and encourage us to hold both things at once rather than kind of seeing the world as black or white, as things are all good or things are all bad. When we are feeling heavy emotions, those often take control and color how we see things. Bringing in gratitude challenges you to recognize the good things are still there, even when your feelings might tell you otherwise. When we are sad or we're angry, those things that we love, the things that bring us joy and the things that we're grateful for, almost feel like they're hiding. And so bringing in gratitude really helps us to acknowledge that both of those things can exist. So expression through gratitude should be authentic and meaningful to you. It is a practice of slowing down and seeking moments, things, or people that you generally appreciate. So I love the GLAD journaling exercise. Some of you who might not be familiar with it, is a great daily practice. It's one that I try to get into the rhythm of doing at the end of the day. So GLAD stands for grateful, learned, achieved, delighted. And so it is a way for you to reflect on your day and identify one thing you were grateful for, one thing you learned or laughed. It really depends on what you want the L to be. One thing you achieved, and one thing you were delighted by. And really the value in this is these can be very small. And it helps us to begin looking and seeing our days as days where we find these things, days that we are delighted by things. And so we'll begin to naturally look for those things and experience more positivity as we, look through the world in that lens. So whether it's GLAD or not, engaging in a daily gratitude reflection, whether that's alone or with others, I am a big fan of using it with others. I actually recently got this app, which is a social app where you can share things that you're grateful for each day with people that you know or people that you don't know. So it's a beautiful way to see the positivity that other people see. So I highly encourage gratitude as a social activity. Gratitude reinforces positive experiences. It focuses and amplifies pleasant feelings and builds connection. And really circling back to how this relates to chronic pain. Remember, pain is reinforced through signals of danger and fear. Unrecognized and unexpressed emotions build up in the body, causing our nervous systems to be more sensitive to change, to challenge, to emotion, to the fluctuations of the day. And a more sensitive nervous system prolongs the healing process and makes our bodies more susceptible to experiencing chronic pain. So emotional awareness and being able to navigate and express your emotions can help with everything here listed on this slide. So reducing tension, relaxing the nervous system. It supports meeting your physical and emotional needs. It promotes engagement with your support system. It improves relationships, and it increases confidence and resilience. So I hope that this was helpful to you all. Thank you guys for engaging, being a part of this workshop that we had today. And please let us know if you have any questions. We are always happy to help you really personalize some of this information for your own lives.
Yes, thank you everyone who attended. And the engagement.
Yes, thank you guys for engaging. Very much appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.